All right, and we are officially recording, and I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to get us started.
Hello, welcome to our second end of work cycle update for stakeholders. Just as a reminder, this event was created in response to stakeholder feedback that it would just be helpful to hold a regular update meeting at the end of each work cycle to share what the team accomplished, as well as what work is coming up next. Please let Chrissy and I know if there's any information that you think would be useful in future meetings, or if you have an idea of another way to communicate this information, or need different information in these updates. So thank you for coming today. We'll try to keep the meeting both informative and concise. And whether you're joining us today or watching this recording, we appreciate your participation in the Surfliner project. So this is today's agenda. We're going to start with a brief recap, followed by updates for specific products, and then an overview of the next work cycle. And finally, we can take some questions if anybody has any.
So to get us started, this is actually an infographic that I put together for a presentation that Jessica and I did at UC Tech last week, but I thought it was a really fun thing to share, just a recap of what the Surfliner team has actually accomplished since we first started working together, which is now over 1,000 days, which is really exciting. So to just quickly summarize our accomplishments since then, we've had 26 team members who have worked on 5 different products, 2 of which are now in production at both campuses. The team has participated in 50 sprints, made over 2,000 commits. We've also sent more than 15,500 Slack messages. We are clearly a chatty bunch. And we also, and these next 2 are for Jessica. We also did win a Golden Solder Award for our work on Starlight, and do have a hidden shark in our logo, although I'm not going to tell you where because that's not fun. You have to go look for it. But to move into the work cycle recap, so this is just a screenshot of Team Gantt, which is what we use to sort of plan out the work. Just a reminder that we work in what I always say is a roughly 60-day on-off work cycle. It's really 56 days. And then we always schedule in a 2-week buffer on each end. So the last one of these was held in past December. So since then, we did a pretty long stretch where we weren't really on a work cycle, but there was a bunch of comment requirement review and MVP planning happening in January and March of this year. Then we started our spring work cycle, which was originally scheduled to run March 31st through May 25th, and was supposed to be comprised of 4 comment sprints. But then we like to say that sills happened to Surfliner, and we needed to take a sort of unexpected, unscheduled sills-related break for that last sprint. So we ended up rescheduling a comment for 2 additional sprints that ran from June 30th through July 27th. We did also have 2 off-cycle sprints that we ran during this time period. One was a DevOps sprint that was run in January through early February, and then the second one was a Starlight sprint that was in June. So now I'm going to turn it over to Gabriella and Tom to give us an update on Comet.
Thanks, Christy and Jessica, and thanks to everyone for making the time this afternoon to be here with us. So Comet is one of the Surfliner platforms that is currently in development. As a reminder, Comet is the staff-facing digital object management platform. The Comet team is comprised of 15 people currently working as a distributed team. We have folks in San Diego, Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Oregon, which makes me think, Chrissy, that we need a train that runs from San Diego to Oregon. What do you think about that?
That would be fantastic.
I know, it's much needed. But I'd like to give kudos and credit to our team members by calling out their names. We have Tom Johnson, our technical lead. You have me, the product owner, Alexandra Dunn from Santa Barbara, Andrew Espinosa from Santa Barbara, Arwen Hutt from San Diego, Chrissy Rissmeyer from Santa Barbara, Evan Clare from Santa Barbara, Jessica Hilt, San Diego, Josh Preston, Santa Barbara, Longshu C2, San Diego, Matt Critchlow, San Diego, Michael Stewart, San Diego, Ron Stanonik, San Diego, Thor Brickman, San Diego, and Vivian Chu, San Diego. And yay, team, these guys are really, really awesome. Next slide, please. Comet development work began on March 31st of this year, and it ran until July 27th. And considering, as Chrissy mentioned, that we had 2 unplanned interruptions during this work cycle, we did manage to complete a total of 5 sprints. Some of those highlights include being able to deposit a work via the user dashboard, standing up staging and production deployments, configuring the object storage backend, configuring user authentication using Google Authentication Services, setting up customizable or configurable metadata with separate per campus metadata configurations, dashboard admin access login in the staging and production environments, stub record creation, that is metadata creation or metadata record creation without the need to upload a content file, easy ID ARC and DOI minting configuration completed, setup of the default workflow for individual object workflows, and IIIF Cantaloupe image server is up and fully functional. And Michael will talk more about this in the Orange Empire section of this meeting. So now I'm going to hand it over to Tom to give us a brief demo of some of the features that I just mentioned and to talk a little bit more about how Comet fits into the overall Surfliner architecture. Tom?
Sure, yeah, hi. I'm also going to go ahead and just blend this right into the Orange Empire update because Michael is indisposed and had to be elsewhere at this time. Chrissy, is it possible for me to take over screen share? Yes, you can show me. Okay, so I think I'll start by just saying that I'm just reminding folks that Comet is scoped as the staff-facing object management. So the idea here is that these are interfaces that staff would use to manage digital collections across the library. For the plan is definitely to have separate instances for different libraries, and indeed some of the infrastructure choices that we're making are slightly different. So where the objects are being stored vary in whatever way the individual campus prefers. Okay, so honestly, a ton of work got done on Comet this past work cycle. It's honestly kind of a miracle that we're just showing you straightforwardly this system as completely like up and running in our respective environments in just 5 sprints. I'm going to go ahead, and this is the Comet staging system, hence the long URL. That's the Comet staging system for UCSB. We're deploying continuously into staging and production into each campus. So that's 4 environments that we're maintaining constantly. Okay, so I'm going to deposit a work. They're called works in the UI, though I think we plan to change that to objects very, very quickly. We've already made a few terminological updates to sort of move away from the underlying system's opinions about what a work is, but we can go ahead and not get into that. So I think what I want to demo here is a couple of things. We'll make a test object for stakeholder demo because we'll do boring regular names for such an important meeting. I'll say that the UI form and the underlying behavior for the metadata are triggered by configuration. This feature is a major achievement. I think this is something that both campuses have wanted for years and years. I think Chrissy and Arwin could speak most directly to that. But these few fields are configured to sort of demo the configurable metadata functionality. One of the things that we expect to see in the next work cycle is to actually have each campus iron out their metadata configurations and deploy those config files. Most of the work that remains on setting up per campus flexible metadata is just in making those choices. So you know, it's just the hard part of deciding what the metadata needs to be and not the easy part of doing the technical work. Okay, so let's say this is in English. And we'll say, okay, I'll leave it private because I'll be embarrassed if I click public and it comes up private, which it would do. ACL configuration is forthcoming. But we do have nested objects, so you can go ahead and add a component here. Oh, and we'll give this one a file. Sample file.pdf. That's a nice boring file name. How about that? I'm tempted to, so I think this is important to the UCSB crowd, or sorry, to the UCSD crowd. Okay, so we can do that. And I don't think I can demo on my desktop environment this drag and drop feature, but what if we just add this whole folder? That seems good. Yeah, okay. My browser's warning me. Okay, so that worked great. We're going to upload a gitignore file. That's nice. Let me go ahead and do that. Okay. So those files got attached. That's nice. The thumbnails didn't generate. That's upcoming work. But we've done some nice stuff, and I'll browse back to the dashboard. I think that I'm not going to be able to demo all the workflow stuff that got done this last sprint. But one thing that I'll point to is that this little bell icon tells me that I have some notifications. These are some things that I have for deposit that have been deposited to a project that I'm assigned as a reviewer for. And I think if I click through, I should see I've got a review process for this, but that's not triggering in this environment, and I haven't looked into why that is. But the rough shape of what we did on workflow for this past work cycle is to add support for individual object configurable workflow. That's I say configurable, but I mean configurable by the Surfliner team in this case. I think that we're pretty far from the idea of end users being able to create new workflows. But I think the plan currently is to have a object workflow per project, and that the Surfliner team would maintain a number of disparate workflow processes depending on stakeholder needs. And then when you set up a project, you would choose the workflow that you use. One thing that I can show you is that there's a really powerful workflow role editor tool. And since this is a staging environment, most of the Comet team has a bunch of workflow roles in this one. So that's what's triggering the notifications again that you saw here. And if I am a owner of a project, in this case, the default project, then I can do things like decide that Chrissy can't review metadata anymore in it. Sorry, Chrissy. Or I can add Chrissy back because I think she probably wants that access. So we'll make you your reviewer in Surfliner default. So this configuration really determines both who's allowed to move an object through a workflow and also who gets these notifications. The workflows are pretty powerful, and I think we're still exploring how we'll make use of them in practice. But I'll sort of cap it there and just say that a big piece of the work that we're planning for the upcoming work cycle is to get in place the infrastructure for running large batches of objects through workflows. So you would, the use case of like, I want to deposit a large number of objects from, say, a CSV file, and then have them go for metadata review, have them write like multiple steps of review process all the way to some point where they are, and I'm going to use the scary word published. We've talked a lot about whether that's a good word, but I think I still don't have a better one. So say the object goes to a point where it's sort of approved and then made available to discovery systems. And then after that, there's probably some maintenance life cycle built into the workflow process. The SMEs did a bunch of work on a sort of baseline workflow, which is the one that's configured, or well, no, it's not the one that's configured here. We really pared it down to prove that we could make workflow work. But I think we're sort of expecting to be able to roll out a sort of default Surfliner workflow that allows us to select batches in some way and move them through together instead of object by object, which I think both campuses think that that's the primary way that they'll go through. And I'm gonna, yeah, this is gonna throw an error. Great, okay. So that's what the error page looks like on staging. Okay. I can, I think in theory, add an object to a collection, but we can't actually create collections. So that's another thing that we're working on in the next work cycle. I think that finishing up the overall object model is our sort of key goal for the next work cycle, as well as doing that batch workflow process. If we feel like if we could get those two things really rolling well and iron out some of the basic UI, that we'd be in a position where we could start to migrate objects into a production system, at least on the UCSB side, which would then really, I think, we're a sort of process-related opinion that we have in Surfliner is that getting things into production early and using them creates the right kind of pressures for further work to get done. I'll go ahead and do this too, because why not? You can see all the things that I've deposited, including several things named Comet in Movement Land. Okay. And this is, the search is sort of a basic blacklight style thing. So if you've seen other blacklight sites, then this will look a little familiar to you. We'll expect things like IIIF image viewer here. I guess the other piece that we're seriously considering doing more on in the next work cycle is background derivative generation. So sort of as the objects come through the workflow, generating automated derivatives like thumbnails or OCR text or etc. And we have a sort of minimal list of those in a ticket somewhere. But one of the compelling things that we think it will be able to deliver in this system is a lot of time-saving automation for digital processing cases. Okay, am I able, I think I might stop there. And am I able to relinquish my screen share abilities? Where did my Zoom? Oh, yeah, here we go. Okay. Oh, somebody else got me. Thank you.
I just took it back from you.
I appreciate that. Okay, so can we go to the next slide and we'll then see what I had on my screen again. Okay, so this is a sort of long list of Comet features. It's a pretty ambitious project. These slides will go out via email. Is that right? Are we posting them somewhere where people can have this?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, great. So this, I think that there may be questions about the details of some of these bullet names. I guess that's just here for you and maybe for reference when we come to questions. And Chrissy, can we bump to the next slide? Oh, look, it's a Surfliner architecture diagram. So there are a couple of things that I want to make reference to in relation to this diagram. One is that, so what you've seen is this sort of like green box in the bottom left of the Comet web app. An enormous amount of the work that got done in the past work cycle was just to get that over a metadata store and a object storage setup, which you see in the sort of center right. The integration with the rest of the stack really is to come. So we have this idea that when objects reach a certain point in the Comet workflow lifecycle, that you would have some power to configure how they'll be available to public systems like Starlight and Shoreline or ? Box. One key part of how we'll make those objects available is through IIIF, at least for images. In this work cycle, a good chunk of work got done sort of under a dual heading of Comet and Orange Empire, which is to say that the delivery of IIIF services is something that's both split by between those two things. So the IIIF manifests the sort of instructions and metadata that IIIF puts out are served from Comet directly, and then we did a fair bit of work, which I'll get into a little bit more in depth in the next section when I change hats and become Proxy Michael. But for my part here now, I'll say that we are rolling out a Cantaloupe IIIF image server. We think that's going to work for us. It looks pretty sharp. We do have some work to do to figure out how we'll actually push content from Comet into that service, and then the sort of questions of how will we pull content like up into Spotlight or into other, how will we use IIIF as each campus are sort of open. But this is really just me saying that that Comet work and IIIF work for us go very hand in hand, because at least for content that that can be displayed as images, IIIF is a important way for us to deliver on Comet's feature set, as well as to deliver on the integration to other Surfliner products. So that's my sort of architectural spiel. This is a brand new architecture diagram, which we may see in other contexts and see evolving. So I'd welcome questions such as people may have about it too, even from the Surfliner team. And Chrissy, I think that's my last slide. So maybe we should just do Orange Empire, and I'll do it super fast, because we just talked about most of it. Yeah, one more, thank you. So Orange Empire is our IIIF infrastructure project. We're not really developing new software for Orange Empire, except in the sort of integration gaps. We are using a Helm chart developed by the UCLA team to ship a existing IIIF image server called Cantaloupe. And the sort of scope of the Orange Empire project is very much to keep us on the same page. So the particular technologies may change over time, but the idea is that we're going to have some cross-campus agreement about what we're rolling for IIIF, so that we can solve scale problems and the like together. Caching is a big cache configuration is a big thing in IIIF image services. So we'll want to try and get those things right together. Again, the manifests themselves are published via Comet, so the pipeline to IIIF is deposit to Comet. We're hoping that that's a compelling story. Let us know what you think. We do have Cockadoo for JP2 support, and I think there's been some work to test integration of that with Cantaloupe. Up next is to really be able to demo that pipeline of ingest Comet, serve image to Cantaloupe, and then I sort of left the next step out, which is then view it again in the Comet UI. So you can do zoom and pan on objects while you're describing them, for instance. So that's IIIF infrastructure. I think that's the whole slide that I have for Orange Empire, and I might now be ready to say who's next.
I think it's Tom again.
Is it really?
Yes, it's Lark.
Oh, geez. Okay. Slide. Am I just not seeing the slide change, or have I lost Chrissy?
No,
No,
it's just the transition slide, Tom. I don't think there's a content slide for Lark.
Oh, I don't see it. I still see AAAF infrastructure. I'm
Oh,
going to go ahead and do Lark since there's not much to say about it at this moment. We last worked on Lark over a year ago now. I think that's right. So there's not a major update on this Lark. So I'll just be really fast and say the goal of Lark is to be a broker for controlled vocabularies and shared authorities across the campuses. I left it out of this Surfliner architecture diagram, which I think we should work to re-add it in upcoming versions of that diagram. But the idea here is that sort of like on the form that you just saw me demo for Comet, you'll be able to deposit, or sorry, you'll be able to select from controlled vocabularies, probably with type ahead in the cases of large vocabularies. And then Lark will act as a broker for reconciliation, as a single source of truth for those vocabularies, and as a point of integration for external data sources like LCSH, for instance. The dream is really for us across the Surfliner project campuses to have a shared knowledge base and a shared set of practices for use of those vocabularies. But again, we've sort of set that project aside at a almost MVP state to work on the object lifecycle stuff. And I think we may sort of do the last mile to get that basic vocabulary stuff in shortly after UCSB starts ingesting content. I've gone out on a limb and said that, but somebody may have to correct me. That's a Lark update.
so next up is Shoreline.
Hello, I'm Alex. So Tom Brittnacher couldn't make it today. So I'll try to answer any questions that we have. Shoreline is our geospatial discovery platform. So we're currently running it in production at UCSB, and we have 345 data sets in there. UCSD is still getting theirs up and running. They have a staging server with just 12 data sets, but they're doing testing, getting it ready for deployment into production. And UCLA is working on getting their own up and running. There hasn't been a great deal of development work recently because Comet has been taking up a lot of our time, but we do have a number of sprints planned for the fall. So one of those priorities is to be able to download the original data. So currently when you upload objects into Shoreline, they're put into GeoServer, which is a component of the system, and it generates derivatives that can be downloaded, but it currently doesn't expose the original data set. So if you really need to make sure that you have exactly what was put in there, you currently can't access it through the interface. So we're going to work on that. Then work on making sure you can ingest geotiffs, and we're going to make sure that we're running the latest version of GeoBlacklight, which is the upstream software that we are building on top of. So that's the development work. So that'll be me as the tech lead and possibly other developers. And then Tom Brittnacher, Amy Work, and the other subject matter experts are going to be also doing their own sprints to work on content, an about page, a help page, and sort of documenting the purpose of geodata. I can do a demo of what we've got, but the look hasn't changed too much, so it might not be worth taking the time. Chrissy, what do you think?
I think I don't think there's been any feature updates since our last stakeholder update. So I don't think it's necessary if there isn't any new work to demo.
Okay, then I think that about sums it up. Unless there's anything I missed. Tom was originally going to be here, so I hope I haven't left anything out.
You did great, Alex.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so should we move on to Starlight? All right. So I'm going to pass this off to Matt in just a second. But one of the things that we wanted to highlight about Starlight and the work that was done since our last update is all of this work was actually done off Workcycle. And I think part of why this is, it sort of reflects that Starlight is the most mature of the Surfliner products. It was really the first one we put into production. And so a lot of the work that was done off cycle before the teams was more a reflection of this being a product that's in production as both campuses, and much of the stuff that was tackled in these off-cycle sprints were more about a really maintenance of the existing platform than any kind of new feature development. So I will turn it over to Matt now to talk about some of the work that was done.
Thanks, Chrissy. So yeah, as Chrissy mentioned, and I guess, I'm not sure if you mentioned it or not, I'll just say it. Starlight is our exhibits feature, or our exhibits platform for Surfliner, and builds heavily off of an existing open source project, which Tom mentioned earlier, called Spotlight. And Spotlight relatively recently went through a major version upgrade to 3.0, which took quite a bit of work, as Chrissy said, in our off cycle to get our Starlight repository prepped to upgrade to. In particular, there were major version updates in Spotlight of Blacklight, which you've heard mentioned and I think is used in most of our Surfliner products for a discovery interface, and Bootstrap, which is a theming engine that we also use in several Surfliner apps, but is also used on our campuses for theming our public websites. That went through a major version upgrade also. And so all that to say, as a result, there was a serious impact to theming. And we've done, I guess I would say, a first pass through that as part of the upgrade, but there's still some rough edges that we're continuing to work on. On the upside of all of those upgrades, we're able to inherit a fair number of accessibility improvements. So we're excited for that. And I believe we're going to be doing some accessibility scans on that soon to see the diff of how much better things have got, so we can hopefully share that out in the future. For batch ingests, which is our primary mode of getting content in at the moment to Starlight, there's improved error reporting, which for any of our users who have done batch ingests, they'll know that that'll be much appreciated should things go wrong. And then there's some new features added for doing various bulk actions, such as adding or removing tags, and then visibility toggling. Beyond the Spotlight 3 upgrade, we also have done some updates to the Starlight Helm chart. I think it was asked in the chat before what a Helm chart is, and yeah, it's our kind of, you could think of it as like a recipe for deployment for Kubernetes, which is the deployment infrastructure that we're collectively using for applications. And we found, if you can think back in your head to the diagram that Tom showed earlier, that, for example, all of the applications currently have a Solr index. And we've discovered, for example, that it might be beneficial for some campuses to run a single instance of Solr, as opposed to having an instance for each of the various applications, or they just prefer to run those services completely externally to the application deployment process itself. And so as a pattern for Surfliner Helm charts in general, we've been trying to expose the ability for institutions to use that should they want to. So Starlight now supports that. And then I think, Chrissy, I'll turn over to you to talk about how your migration's going to the cloud for Starlight.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so one of the things that I do want to call out is that the 3.0 release has been deployed on San Diego's infrastructure, but not to Santa Barbara's yet. And really the reason behind that is that because this was our very first application that was put into production, and I think partially it was put into production at Santa Barbara first, it's also our only Surfliner application that's running on premise servers as opposed to in one of our two campus cloud services. I may be mischaracterizing the San Diego Minio stack, so apologies if I am. But at Santa Barbara, it's an on-prem server. So we've been working to migrate our production and our staging state to Amazon Web Services. We tried to couple this with the Spotlight 3.0 upgrade, but because especially the theming was impacted so heavily, it was really difficult to diagnose if issues we were seeing was connected to the broken theme or to an issue with the migration. So we've sort of stepped back and are working on just migrating our site with the existing or with the legacy code base, and then we'll work on upgrading the Santa Barbara version of Spotlight to this 3.0 release. So that is going very well, and after some delays, and hopefully we'll be able to tackle that in the next week or two and actually get our 30 or so exhibits migrated. The other thing too related to this is we are hoping to finally migrate the Starlight Spotlight documentation site that's currently hosted on the UCSB staging site, which was a decision we made back before we had any exhibits published as a place to put it. We're hoping to actually migrate that into its own instance of Spotlight that isn't, connected to either campus, that's connected to Surfliner. So planning for that in the somewhat near future. And that site also will be getting a content refresh following the 3.0 migration because there have been some updates to the admin interface and some new features. So we're going to be working on getting that documentation updated soon. And I think that is it for Starlight. So I am going to move us along to talk a bit about what is upcoming for Surfliner. So we are actually, because of the SILS related interruption, our new work cycle starts really soon on September 1st and is scheduled to run through the end of October. Right now, we are definitely planning on running 4 Comet sprints. Depending on how those sprints go, we are hoping possibly after the first 2 sprints, we want to evaluate Comet's project and if we have time, we plan to split off a subset of the team to work on some of the Shoreline work that Alex mentioned in her update about Shoreline. And then looking forward to next year, we have already scheduled our winter 2022 work cycle, which is scheduled to run from January 19th through March 15th. Because there's still a bunch of outstanding work happening in this next work cycle, we have not yet determined exactly which mix of products will be in sprint for that work cycle. That really depends on the progress of each of those, as well as the needs of the individual products and the stakeholders. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica.
So staying up to date, this is just how can you stay up to date, and it's pretty easy. There are 3 really main ways. We are on UC Tech Slack. If you're not on UC Tech Slack, you can find it at uctech.slack.com. We're in the Surfliner channel, or if you would like a channel that's really just the announcements and kind of the highlights, that's going to be Surfliner-announce. And then surfliner.ucsd.edu is our blog. That blog has things like our sprint reviews and summaries of what we're working on. It's you know, a concise way to get updated. It's also where all of our videos get published. So once we've published them on YouTube, we put them up on the blog. And then you can always just contact us directly. Chrissy is the project owner for UC Santa Barbara. I'm the one for UC San Diego, or you can contact the product owners directly if you have questions about a particular feature or for that product. And that's it. Would you like to ask a question?
And I can, if it will encourage people to ask questions, I can stop the recording. I know sometimes folks prefer that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.